You are listening to Quality Time, a podcast designed to support Nebraskan providers through their journey with Step Up to Quality. I am your host, Colleen Schmidt. Get ready to listen as we prepare to elevate each other as we step up to quality. Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back, everyone. Today, I am speaking with the fabulous Cari Ebert. Cari is a pediatric speech language pathologist, and she's in private practice in the Kansas City, Missouri area, so not too far from us, Cari. She specializes in autism, apraxia, and early intervention, and she is a proud defender of play-based learning. So welcome, Cari.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be able to join you on this podcast. So thanks for inviting me.
Oh, we're so happy that you said yes and that you were willing to share your expertise. So I just gave a little brief intro about you, but give our listeners a little bit more about your story and kind of what led you to doing what you do now. Like, what's your why behind what you do?
Oh, gosh, what a great question. Yeah, I have been a speech language pathologist for 25 plus years. And when I got out of grad school, I thought I wanted to work with adults, and I was wrong. I did that for a few years and was not satisfied in my career choice. And then I had my first child, and I went, whoa, this whole child development thing is amazing. And ended up having another daughter. Our daughters are actually 11 months apart in age, and I don't really recommend that method, but that's how they came to us. So that's how we took them. So it was quite an experience. And I was just so fascinated with early child development. And I've always been a kid person. And it came very natural to me to get on the floor and play. And so when I switched to pediatrics, I didn't just do pediatrics. I went to birth to 3. So I went to the really tiny ones and really found my passion, not only working with tiny humans, but also supporting their parents and their caregivers and through parent coaching. So I am a huge proponent of supporting families so that they can help their own child learn and develop naturally, during everyday routines and interactions. And then 7 years later, we had our third child, and it was a boy. And Aaron is autistic, and he is now 19 years old. And Aaron has taught me an awful lot about my career. Yep. And so one of my most popular courses now is my Autism and Neurodiversity Affirming Practices course. So I travel all around the country as a professional speaker and do professional development trainings. I spend a lot of time in Nebraska at your ESUs and doing a lot of training around the state. So Nebraska is one of my favorite places to be. So I spend a lot of time there.
That's where, and I shared with you before we started recording, but I want everyone else to hear. I learned about Cari from a home-based provider here in Nebraska. I was actually doing a training on loose parts. And one of the attendees was like, the defender of play said that I can use trash. And I was like, who is the defender of play? It's you, Cari. So
I love that. I've used that term for so long. I even made t-shirts that said defender of play, defender of play. What's so funny is in the past, I'm going to say 5 to 10 years, play has become a dirty word in our country. And people who don't know how young children with developing brains and bodies learn best, they tend to poo-poo play. I'll hear things like this. Oh, we really liked our last speech therapist. She was really sweet, but all she did was just play with our child. I thought someone was going to come in and teach him. Or, we really like our daughter's preschool. It's really nice. Everybody there is so friendly, but all they do is just play. I think I'm going to pull my child out and enroll her in a more academic focused preschool. And so this is why I've now changed. I no longer call my course the power of play. Now everything is the power of play-based learning. So I've decided to use the entire phrase play-based learning because so many people in society think play is the opposite of learning. They literally view, learning as serious business, as work, as something that, there shouldn't be any laughing or giggling going on. There should be no shenanigans, if you're learning. And then they view the other end of the continuum as play, as though play was a break from learning. Like that's and everybody needs a little break, but that it's not what's important. And so this is my new platform, is that we need to defend play-based learning. And I find that it's easier to do when you use the whole phrase. So I would encourage your listeners, instead of just talking about play and play is important and play, call it play-based learning.
I love that, Cari. I think words matter. I think how we talk about what we do and who we are matters. I'm going to steal that and use play-based learning as a way. I taught kindergarten, and I would often get feedback of, oh, how fun. Wouldn't it be fun to play all day? Oh, how fun. My brother even asked me if I got paid the same as a real teacher. And
yeah. Oh, yes. Don't we hear that a lot? Where people, our friends and family, say, oh, wow, how fun. You get to go to work and play with little kids all day. Like I have a real job. Like I have to go to a bank, or I have to go work on a construction site, but you get to play with little kids all day, as if play was somehow unimportant, and that's that whole slighting of, slight. They slight our field. They slight early childhood education. There's this idea that play is unimportant. And the research is so clear, and there is so much research. And actually, the research on play-based learning is really rooted in the field of neuroscience. And so I think it's so important that we recognize the power of play-based learning. And we have got to make sure that we are demanding respect for our field, because early childhood education is important. And most people just view it as, oh, they're just playing, right? I have several free handouts on my website. And one of them is called, Why Does My Child Just Play in Speech Therapy? I love that one. And then I have another one, and it's this one is available in English and in Spanish, but it's called The Power of Play-Based Learning. So it's just a one-page handout that just really, in a few sentences with some cute pictures, just sort of highlights why we should be defenders of play-based learning, because we need to band together in early childhood and make that stance, because play is disappearing, and it is disappearing very rapidly. It is disappearing from our homes, from our neighborhoods, from our child care centers, and it has all but disappeared from our schools. Another fascinating evidence-based document that I want your listeners to know about is called Crisis in the Kindergarten, Why Children Need to Play in School. And it is an evidence-based document put out by the Alliance for Childhood. And it is one of the most powerful documents defending play-based learning out there. And it's just important that we continue to advocate and continue to cite the research. And this is the hill I will die on. If you follow me on social media, been doing lots of posts on play-based learning. And it's just very important that we don't sit quietly in the corner, and that we are advocating for young children with developing brains and bodies.
I am in total agreement with you. I also think a piece that sometimes is missing from our workforce is the ability to do that. You know what I mean? Like, if we believe this and we have these practices, we need to know the why behind it and be able to pull PJ out of our back pocket and be like,
absolutely.
Here's why.
Absolutely. That is so funny that in my play-based learning course, I actually quote Piaget, and it's like way back from like 1972. And he talks about, the reason play is so powerful is because young children learn best through activity. And I just love that, that way back then he was noticing, recognizing that they need activity. So when I talk about play-based learning, I want people to understand that all that means is it's hands-on, minds-on learning. I feel like play-based learning, or play in general, gets a bad rap because they think, oh, well, we'll have parents say things like, well, I don't want them to play in school. I want them to learn. And so all we mean when we say play-based learning is that the child is actively engaged. And so play-based learning isn't just for early childhood. Play-based learning is for all of us. We all learn best through hands-on, minds-on learning. Okay. And this is the example I like to share is if human beings, well, let me step back. Because of technology, we have a new type of play that we have to be talking about. And the new type of play is called screen-based play. And I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, you should just take the iPad away or limit screen time. Like, we live in the digital age. Screen time is here to stay. You know, we need to have mindful screen time habits. We need to have screen time rules in our homes, you know, absolutely. But it's just really important to understand that in screen-based play, young children are not actively engaged, right? It's passive entertainment. And so there's a big difference between, rote memorizing some, letters, numbers, shapes, and colors on an educational app, for example. Okay. So the example I like to give is, if human beings could learn new skills by simply watching other people do them, then the fact that I watch HGTV a lot, that should mean then that I'm a skilled carpenter. And I am not a skilled carpenter. I mean, I don't know how to use power tools. I don't know how to retile my bathroom. I don't know how to put up shiplap. Now, I can tell you how to do some of those things because I've watched other people do them. So I might have the language to be able to explain something, but it doesn't mean I have the skill. And as a speech language pathologist, one of the things I'm seeing more and more of is young children who have a lot of language, but they're not communicating very effectively. And so you can have language and still not be very communicative. Being able to recite learned concepts like label your letters, count to 50, label all your shapes, and numbers. I mean, that's great, but that is just memorizing isolated information. That's what we call surface level learning. And so I encourage your listeners to think about learning more like an iceberg. And the tip of the iceberg is that surface level learning, rote memorization. And that's where all learning does start. Like, literally, all learning starts with language. All learning starts with rote memorization. But then we need to take that surface level learning and provide experiences. And those experiences are what allow for deeper learning. And that's the area of the iceberg that is below the surface of the water. And that's actually the biggest part of the iceberg. It's not the part you see, but it's the biggest part. And so we really want to think about how important experiences are for learning and development. And so my little formula for learning is language plus experience equals learning. Language plus experience. So my concern in the digital age and in this age of flashcards and preschool on TV, make your baby smarter toys, all of this, my concern is that children are being given lots and lots and lots of language. The problem is they are not having enough experiences. And so we're seeing there's not a balance. There's this asymmetry where parents will always say, but he's so smart. He's so smart. I evaluated a 2.5-year-old and the mom was like, he's so smart. He can skip count. And this 2.5-year-old who has no functional communication skills at all is like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15. And everybody's like, yay, he's so smart. And I'm like, okay, like what, I mean, okay, so he can memorize, but where is the benefit to that, right? And so that's really where I think we need to hit it home is the children. All human beings need experiences. And that's where play-based learning comes in. It's hands-on, minds-on learning. One of the questions that I encourage parents to ask themselves at the end of every day is this: how many non-screen experiences did my child have today? It's just a simple question. Because another way to ask it is, how many varied experiences did my child have today? And by varied experiences, I don't mean you have to like go to the zoo or go to a museum. You don't have to spend any money. Varied experiences for young children are things like, did you allow your child to stand on a stool and help you stir the pancake batter, right? Did you measure the ingredients? Because that's early math, right? Did you let them help you fold the laundry or help you load the dishwasher? Or did you let your child go with you to get the mail and allow them to help you sort it into kid mail versus mom mail? Because kid mail is what we call junk mail. And there is no better mail, especially these political ads that are coming on the hard, it's like thicker paper for early scissor skills, right? So the kid mail is we give them a pair of child safe scissors and allow them to cut away, right? Make sure you take that Hy-Vee ad and use that to talk about all different foods and what we need to buy at the grocery store. And, so I'm really big into helping families really understand that every activity and every interaction is a learning opportunity for your young child. You don't need to set aside special time to work on language. You don't need to set aside special time to work on gross motor or fine motor. You don't need to focus on making your child smarter. What you need to do is give your child varied experiences. Think back for a minute to the pandemic, when none of us could go anywhere. Remember, we were, we had to stay at home. We didn't have very many varied experiences. And all we did was watch Netflix all day. And I would say our mental health as adults, was not very good during the pandemic. And when we look back at that experience, it was because of the lack of varied experiences. We couldn't gather with our friends and family. We couldn't go places. We couldn't do things. And human beings, our nervous systems, really thrive on varied experiences. And so in this digital age that we live in, we know that kids like screen time. We know that. But kids also like to climb trees and climb the wrong way up a slide. And they like to dig and make mud pies. And they like to help you pick out apples at the grocery store. And they like to make pancakes. And we have to make sure that we are really thinking about varied experiences in our media manic world in which we live.
I think that's such a message that people can resonate with. Me as a mama, I resonate with what you're saying, and I try to be mindful about limits and screen time, but I agree with you. Like, this is where we are and where we're going. It's just becoming more and more. But I sure like the idea of thinking about play-based learning as kind of the active learning and the experience that brings it all together.
Absolutely.
When I taught kindergarten, I was the queen of surface level learning. Every child in my room could identify all letters and sounds.
Right.
They could decode words. Did they like reading? No, because I drilled and killed them to get them to be able to do it. Could they always apply it? No.
Right. And I think that's so important. I think that's what we do as professionals is we reflect and refine. I always say that is really what professional development, professional growth is. Reflect on what we were taught, reflect on our past practices, reflect on how we have, done our job. And then what we do is we refine, right? We refine based on new research, based on our ability to self-reflect and self-analyze and grow as professionals. Maya Angelou's famous words, we do the best we can until we know better. And when we know better, we do better. And I know that's probably overused at this point, but I just think it's so powerful because that is what professional development, professional growth is all about, is making sure we are always reflecting and refining our practices so that we are providing developmentally appropriate practice. And I guess that's one of, my big concerns, especially in early childhood, is there is too much of an emphasis on early academics, on force-feeding academics. I go into daycares and preschools, and I'm always shocked because they look like kind of a mini kindergarten or first grade classroom. The expectation for them to sit and be still and be quiet. I don't understand that because, especially when you're talking about like 2 and 3 year olds, they literally have just figured out how to move their bodies. And now you want them to sit still. Nothing about nervous systems, our understanding of how nervous systems operate really leads us to believe that human beings should sit still to learn. Nervous systems need movement. And so I'm going to tell you guys, the most powerful book I have ever read in my career is called A Moving Child is a Learning Child. And I cannot tell you how that shifted my whole thought process about early child development. A moving child is a learning child. And the subtitle of that book is How the Body Teaches the Brain to Think. And it is the most powerful book that really helps us understand that human nervous systems need movement to regulate, and only a regulated person can learn. You can't learn if you're dysregulated. And so when we start to see young children fidget and move around, and they're always moving their bodies and they're messing, what their nervous system is telling them. And so the brain is like communicating with the body. Every time somebody fidgets, the brain is saying, "Excuse me, body, if you would like me to continue to focus, I'm going to need a little bit of movement here." And so what your body does is fidgets in your chair, you move your arms, you stand up, you wiggle, and there's almost always some adult saying, sit still, be quiet, keep your hands to yourself. You need to pay attention. Well, what we need to do is step back and go, oh, wait, that child's nervous system is communicating to us that they're not regulated, that they are in the process of dysregulating. So what we need to do is change the environment in which they learn. Instead of trying to, scold the child or change the child's behavior or try to make them pay attention or listen, we need to make learning more play-based. We need it to be hands-on, minds-on. So if I'm in a little preschool 3-year-olds and we're sitting in circle time trying to sing the wheels on the bus and, doing some of the actions, but the kids are still fidgeting and they seem a little antsy, I would get up and say, we need to build our bus. Everybody go grab your chair. And, we're going to pull, that's some heavy work. We're going to pull those chairs over 2 by 2, just like when you ride the bus. And the kid who's the driver, I'll give him a Frisbee or a paper plate so he can be driving. And when we sing the wheels out, the driver on the bus says, move on back. And then we'll play musical chairs and we'll all move. And the kids are moving and they're engaging and they're using their bodies. And that is the power of play-based learning, hands-on, minds-on learning.
So when hands-on, minds-on learning is happening, and whether I'm actually doing that as a teacher of young children, or sometimes I get to observe that happening, what I notice is challenging, I'm using air quotes, challenging behaviors decline. So to me, there's a direct connection too of if we're having these developmentally inappropriate expectations for really little kids, that goes against their whole nervous system. And then we say they are not listening. My kids this year are so hard. They won't cooperate. I can't do group time. There's scientific reason behind the why.
Absolutely. And one of my big pushes, I have a course called Using Compassion, Connection, and Co-Regulation to Address Challenging Behavior in Young Children. But one of the things we talk about is allow children, okay, think about this for a minute. Only you know what your nervous system needs right now to stay regulated. So if you needed a fidget in your hand, like I have lots of little fidgets as I sit here, because I do lots of webinars and podcasts. And so, if you need a fidget, I also keep cold water next to my, so that I have something to drink. But if I were sitting in a class, maybe I would suck on a mint. Mints are alerting to me if I feel like I'm going to get sleepy. Chewing gum is alerting to me. I am a doodler. If I have a pen in my hand, all through college, I had to doodle. And it wasn't that I wasn't paying attention. It was that doodling allowed me to pay attention, because if I wasn't doing something with my hands or my mouth, it's one or the other for me. See, I'm learning more about my nervous system. If I don't do something with my hands or my mouth, then I start daydreaming. Then I start thinking about other things, and then I can't focus on what the professor is saying. And so each of us have figured out in this thing called life, what it is that our own nervous system needs to stay regulated. Some of you twirl your hair, some of you click your pen, some of you chew on your fingernails. Like, we all have different things that we do. My daughter, who is a nurse, she's an RN, she's a charge nurse now, and she cannot sit in a chair to save her life. She cannot sit she has to be on her haunches. She's always like changing position, and she's up, and she's like, Mom, it just kills me because at work, the chairs are so uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, you've never been able to sit though. Do you know what I mean? And so it's just important for us to realize that only the child knows what their nervous system needs to stay regulated. So what we need to do is allow children to move their bodies as needed without having to get for permission. When we realize that kids don't have to sit crisscross applesauce, that they don't have to always sit that way, that they can sit on their tall knees, they can sit on their haunches, they can rock back and forth, they can stand if they need to. And some people say, oh, but if I let one child stand, then they'll all stand. I'm telling you, if you are engaging, if you're reading a book aloud or whatever you're doing, if you're doing it right, the kids who need to move their bodies will. The kids who can focus, they will focus. And so there's too much of but what if? But if I let one move, then the other. Well, I'm sorry, we all need accommodations. Every one of us has certain times during the day when we need accommodations. And being allowed to move your body in ways that help regulate your nervous system is your right. And so that's part of what we need to understand is teaching shouldn't be about getting kids to sit still and be quiet. Whole body listening is a thing of the past. We need to really think about whole body learning, right? Whole body learning is the new phrase now. And so we really want to encourage, and talk about differences, that some of us learn best when we're sitting crisscross applesauce. Some of us learn best when we're rocking back and forth. Some of us, need to move our bodies more. And, so it's really about just helping kids understand. I did a post a few days ago about inclusive books, books that really picture books for kids that help understand that, that people have different brains and our brains don't all function the same. And that's really what neurodiversity is all about. Neuro means brain, diversity means differences. So it's really about acknowledging that we have brain differences in the human race. And we need to stop trying to make all kids learn the same way, right? Because we know there's no way every child can possibly learn in the exact same way.
Recently, I've been supporting a large district here in Nebraska that has a large population of children with special needs or varying needs, and they are included in the classroom. And what's been happening lately is the teachers are learning very quickly that they're having to put everything you just said into practice in real ways. So I kind of want to pivot a little bit, and I want you to talk to us a little bit about inclusion and early intervention. You shared earlier that your sweet boy kind of led you on a journey for learning even deeper about those topics. So talk to us.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, I think that it's really important to understand that there is no right or wrong way to play. I sometimes see providers who work with young children want to write goals to teach children how to play appropriately with toys, or they will write in their report, the child does not play appropriately with toys, and so they think they want to fix that. And I just want everybody to really think about what play is. Play is the spontaneous activity of children. And because it's spontaneous, there is no right or wrong way to play. And so children with brain differences, our neurodivergent children, often play in different ways. So I will just tell you, autistic children play differently from non-autistic or what we call allistic children. And it's very important to recognize that play is the medium through which we connect and engage with young children. So we don't need to write goals for play. Play is just the medium through which we engage and interact. The kind of goals that I want to focus on with autistic children, we want to work on regulation. So we want to think about sensory, meeting their sensory needs, but also their social emotional needs, right? So that's all regulation. That's regulating their nervous system. I always say that you have to, when you look at the order in which we do things, first it's regulation, then it's connection, and then it's instruction. Regulation, connection, instruction. So everything starts with regulation, right? Making sure that you are meeting their sensory needs, and then really focusing on building that authentic connection with the child, really knowing what gives them their brain tingles. What is it that they love? What are their deep interests? What are their, what are their favorite movie characters and their favorite, songs and all of those things. And that's how we build that authentic connection. And then and only then can we teach new skills. And I feel like what happens so often in education and in therapy is we try to write goals for instruction, right? The child will learn X or will perform this at 80% accuracy. But then what I hear so often is the provider, the adult, the teacher, the therapist says, well, I can't get them to, or they blame the child. Well, the child won't comply. The child is non-compliant. The child refuses to participate. So what they're doing is blaming the child for their way of being human, for their differences, instead of acknowledging that, hey, I need to change how I engage that child. And so child-led play has been my real focus on social media this past week, really giving multiple examples of what child-led play is. So what I'd love your listeners to think about is a kind of a continuum of learning. The least structured way for kids to learn is through free play. Right? Because free play, there's no participation or involvement from an adult. Then we have a little more structured is what we call child-led, adult-guided. Right? That's where we are following the child's lead, and then we are scaffolding, right? Providing support based on the child's goals. Okay. Then more structured than that is what we'd call adult structured play, adult directed play. Those are playful games and activities, but they're all planned by the adult, initiated by the adult. Ending point is determined by the adult. And then the most structured way to learn is direct instruction, right? So you've got this continuum. So I'm just here to tell you that for neurodivergent kids, the magic happens in child-led, adult-guided. That's where the magic happens, because they can smell your agenda. And if they sense that you have an agenda and that you're going to try to get them to do X, they usually have a demand avoidance behavior. It might be hitting, it might be pushing, it might be screaming. My son's demand avoidance behavior was just turn around and just just disengage you completely. And how many times I've been told in his life that he was non-compliant, that he refused. Well, the issue is actually with the adult, but for far too long, we've blamed the neurodivergent child. So it's really about thinking about meeting the child's needs and building that authentic connection. And I'm telling you, when you do that, it is amazing to watch these kids soar, but it's really about meeting them where they're at rather than saying, I'm going to get them to do X, Y, or Z, right? We allow them. And that's why our services need to be so individualized. And we need to know if you have a child in your class who is what you would consider a struggling learner, someone who really isn't participating much, kind of wanders off and does their own thing, you've got to figure out what they love. And if they love Bluey, or if they love dinosaurs, or if they love car washes, I don't care what it is, I've got a book on every topic, or I will find a book, I will find a way, I will find a puzzle that has, whatever it is, I am all in on your interest because I want you to feel included. Remember, inclusion is more than a location. And I think that's the one tip I would, just to kind of give your listeners something to really ponder, is that for far too long, we viewed inclusion as a location, a place for services. And I promise you, inclusion is an action. It is not a location.
Oh, I love that. That is such a good way to describe what inclusion is. Something I kind of want to go back to a little bit with your continuum of play. I like how you described that. I like how you really kind of connected the dots for us. I think a lot of adults, including a lot of early childhood people, are most comfortable in the adult structured play or direct instruction.
That's why we were all trained. I mean, as a speech therapist, I had to go to grad school and I had to write a lesson plan for every speech therapy session. I had to put what toy I was going to use, how many minutes I was going to play with it, and what goal it related to on the plan of care. So you better believe we're all trained to do this. And this is why child-led adult guided play or child-led adult guided speech therapy for me is such a challenge for so many professionals, because it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like we're in charge. And I think that's where this shift is. You need to know your goals, and your goals should be able to be addressed in any activity that is relevant and meaningful to the child, right? And so that's what it has to be. I mean, if you're like, well, maybe it's something like, well, he needs to learn to use scissors. He can't use scissors. Well, you need to work with an occupational therapist and make sure. Our son wouldn't touch scissors, and everybody was so freaked out about it until the OT provided spring-loaded scissors, that were easier to use, and then taught us the file folder trick. I'm like, why doesn't everybody know the file folder trick?
Which is the file folder trick.
You stick a file folder literally under their arm. And they have to hold it, and that way it stabilizes the shoulder. So, because so many of our kids cut with their elbow up in the air, and then the scissors are not in the correct, plane to cut. So you stick a file folder under their arm and hold it. Give them spring-loaded scissors. And my son, he learned to cut in one cutting session, but they had spent months in early childhood trying to get him to do it, saying he was non-compliant, that he would refuse. And this is where we bring in our therapists, right? And our special education teachers. We have to make sure that we have strategies. We actually call them environmental accommodations, right? Our job is to provide accommodations and modifications to help this child be able to participate and be able to access the same activities that non-disabled children can participate in and engage in. And so it's really about accommodations and modifications more so than we need to fix deficits. We're really trying to move away from this idea of fixing. Children aren't broken, so they don't need to be fixed. But a lot of people think that's what we do. And so it's really more, there's a great quote, and I don't have it in front of me, but it goes something like this. If a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And we just relate that to what we do for a living and say, if a child doesn't thrive, you fix the environment in which they learn, you don't fix the child. And I think that's where we just need to make sure we're all on that same page together.
And that's inclusion, not the environment.
Yep.
That's inclusion. I love also what you mentioned about the, first is regulation, next is connection, then's instruction.
Absolutely.
And we often try to jump to instruction before we do either of those first two
Any
things.
of those things. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
So I love what you've said, Cari, and I know we've talked a lot of it in a short amount of time and given listeners a lot of info already, but I want to speak specifically about advocacy. That's our theme. We're in season 3 of our podcast, which is super fun, but our theme this year is advocacy. I want to know, is there anything that you would kind of want to wrap up or share with our listeners on being an advocate for play-based learning?
Yeah, I think that in order to be an advocate for play-based learning, you have to really truly recognize the power of learning through play. And I think if you yourself say, well, all I do is just play with kids for a living, if you say that, then there's no way you can advocate for it. So making sure that you truly understand that we are talking about nervous system and brain development, that we are talking about decades and decades of research showing how young children with developing brains and bodies learn best. And so I really think it's about honing in professionally on what play-based learning is and understanding that play-based learning, there's different tiers of it, different levels. That when we say play-based learning, we don't just mean free play. We don't mean just let kids do whatever they want and hope and pray they learn something that we can document. That's not what we mean. In early childhood education, play-based learning is going to be the sweet spot in the middle of that continuum, which is a combination of child-led, adult-guided, and then there will be some adult-directed games and activities. And it's a combination of those two things. But what I'm concerned about is early childhood is looking more like direct instruction. It's moving more and more toward that super structured side of the continuum. And that's where we need to be careful.
Yeah. I think that's such a good way to put it, really understanding about how the nervous system impacts how we learn, getting really articulate about being able to share what we do and why we do it.
Exactly. Well, not only does the nervous system affect how kids learn, it affects how they behave. Yeah. And one of the biggest obstacles that most early childhood providers cite is challenging behavior. That's one of the biggest obstacles. So we've got to recognize that behavior is a sign of dysregulation. And so the goal is to figure out, why is this child struggling in this moment? And it's usually either because of an unmet need or a missing skill. Right? Those are usually the two reasons that kids dysregulate. So we could talk for hours, but I think that we have probably covered our topic.
We have, but I would love to talk for hours. I think we could have 3 or 4 more podcasts on a bunch of different topics with you, Cari. We appreciate your expertise so much and for sharing. Please tell our listeners where they can find you on social media. You shared great resources. I'm going to make sure that we can link up some of the artifacts.
And I have one I would like to send you where I got that play-based learning continuum from. So I would like to send you, it's research from in neuroscience. So I would like to send you that link. It's actually, it was put out by the Lego Foundation. So I will send you that link because I would love for you to include that. But you can go to my website, which is carieebertseminars.com. You can follow me on Instagram and or Facebook. And my social media handle is Cari Ebert Seminars. So those are the best ways. I also have my own podcast called the SLP Talk Show. So if you want to hear my husband and I do that together, my husband has a different perspective being a dad. And so I invite you to take a listen to that as well.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you again, Cari, for joining.
Yes. Thanks for your time.
And thank you, everyone, for spending quality time with us. Please join us again as we chat about future topics to support our Nebraskan providers on their journey with Step Up to Quality. Until next time, bye-bye.